Chapter 5 Ink and Iron. The clock tower had been abandoned for 30 years, its gear seized by rust and neglect, but it still commanded a view of half the city. Alara pressed herself against the cold iron framework, watching the gaslit streets below, while Kyle lay unconscious on the dusty floor behind her. The binding had shattered spectacularly, sending shockwaves through the whispering market that had brought half the tunnel system down. In the chaos that followed, Collector Thane's screams of rage, the Order's enforcers pouring through every entrance, Magister Vale shouting instructions she couldn't hear over the din, Alara had done the only thing that made sense. She grabbed the fallen Kale and run. Getting an unconscious man up 7 flights of narrow stairs had nearly killed her, but the alternatives were worse. The Order would reclaim him, repair whatever damage her sketch had done, and use him to hunt down everyone who'd witnessed his momentary freedom. The market's denizens would likely tear him apart for centuries of enforcing the Order's will, regardless of whether he'd had a choice in the matter. Now, 3 hours later, she was beginning to wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake. Hale had been unconscious when they'd arrived, his breathing shallow and his skin cold as winter stone. But as dawn approached, he'd begun to change. The perfectly tailored suit had torn in places, revealing skin that seemed to shimmer between human flesh and something that looked like starlight made solid. His hair had darkened from black to something deeper than midnight, and when he'd briefly opened his eyes, they'd held depths that spoke of skies she'd never seen. Whatever he truly was, it wasn't human. And whatever the Order had done to bind him, breaking those chains had left him vulnerable in ways that made her skin crawl with unease. "You should have left me there." His voice startled her from her vigil at the window. She turned to find him sitting up, his back against the tower's central column. In the gray pre-dawn light, he looked different, wilder, more angular, as if his humanity had been a careful disguise that was finally slipping away. "The Order would have taken you back," she said. "Better that than this." He gestured to the iron framework surrounding them, and she noticed the way he flinched whenever his skin came too close to the metal. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I broke your chains, set you free." Even as she said it, she realized how naive it sounded. Kale's laugh was bitter as December wind. Free! Such a simple word for such a complicated concept. He struggled to his feet, moving with less of that predatory grace she'd grown accustomed to. "Tell me, Miss Vance, what do you know about the Fae?" "Stories, folk tales." She kept her sketchbook ready, though she wasn't sure what she could draw that would help if he decided to turn violent. "Creatures of magic and mischief. Creatures of power and ancient grudges," he corrected. "We don't forgive easily. We don't forget at all. And we have very specific ideas about justice." His silver eyes fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. "The Order enslaved me 3 centuries ago, bound me with cold iron and words of power, forced me to hunt my own kind for their expansion of human territory. Do you think those centuries of service were pleasant?" The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She'd freed something ancient and angry, something with centuries of reasons to hate humanity. And she'd done it in the tower, made of the one substance that could weaken him. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "Of course you didn't. Humans never do." But there was less venom in his voice than she'd expected. "You saw chains and decided to break them. It's almost admirable in its naivety. What are you going to do now?" Kale was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city that was beginning to stir with the morning's activity. "I should kill you," he said conversationally, "not out of malice, but out of practicality. You're the key to their power, a forger of tremendous potential. Without you, their plans become significantly more difficult." Alara's hand tightened on her sketchbook. But you freed me when you had nothing to gain from it. You risked your own safety to pull me from that collapsing market when you could have simply escaped." He turned to look at her, and for a moment his expression was almost human. Why? The question hung in the air between them. Why had she risked everything for someone who'd been hunting her? Why had she chosen to see him as a victim rather than a threat? "Because," she said slowly, "I spent my whole life watching people use others as tools. The wealthy using the poor, the strong using the weak. I recognize the look in your eyes, the same one I see in my own mirror sometimes. the look of someone who's tired of being used. And you think that creates some bond between us? I think it means we want the same things, even if we come from different worlds. Kale was quiet again, and she could almost see him wrestling with concepts that didn't come naturally to his inhuman nature. What I want, he said finally, is to watch the order burn. To see every one of their agents who chose to serve them suffer as they made others suffer. To reclaim my throne in the gloaming and ensure that no human ever again sets foot in my realm. And my sister? The innocent people who will be caught in the crossfire. Acceptable casualties in a just war. The coldness in his voice made her stomach clench. This was what she'd freed, not a potential ally, but a force of nature pointed at everything she cared about. There has to be another way, she said. Why? Because you wish it so. Kale moved closer, and despite his weakness from the iron, she could feel power radiating from him like heat from a forge. Your people have spent centuries subjugating mine. The Order is merely the latest iteration of that ancient pattern. Why should I care about minimizing human casualties? Because you're better than they are. The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. Kale stopped mid-stride, his expression shifting through confusion, anger, and something that might have been hope. Better than who? Than the people who enslaved you. Than the Order who treats everyone, human and fey alike, as tools to be used. She stood up, meeting his inhuman gaze directly. I've seen how the Order operates. They don't care about balance or protection. They care about control, about using power to accumulate more power. And you think I'm different? I think you could be. She opened her sketchbook, but instead of drawing protective wars or binding spells, she began to sketch him. Not as he appeared now, wild and dangerous and barely contained, but as she'd glimpsed him in unguarded moments. Tired, hurt, longing for something he'd almost forgotten existed. You had 3 centuries to become as ruthless as your captors, but you warned me about the Order's true nature. You could have simply dragged me back to them without explanation, but you didn't. That was tactical necessity. No, it wasn't. Her pencil moved across the page, capturing the conflict she could see in his posture. You wanted me to understand what I was choosing. You wanted me to have a real choice, even though giving me one made your job harder. Kale fell silent, watching her draw. The sketch that emerged wasn't just a portrait, it was a story. A prince reduced to a slave, a creature of starlight and wild magic, forced to serve those who saw him as nothing more than a weapon. But also someone who'd retained enough of his original self to recognize injustice, even when he was forced to serve it. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. "Showing you what I see when I look at you." She held up the finished sketch, not a monster seeking revenge, but someone who's forgotten what it feels like to have choices. He stared at the drawing for a long moment. "You see me as a victim. I see you as someone who could choose to be better than the people who hurt you. And if I choose revenge anyway, if I decide that 3 centuries of slavery justify whatever I do to break free." Alara considered the question seriously. "Then I'll stop you if I can. Not because I don't understand your anger, but because innocent people don't deserve to pay for the Order's crimes. Even if stopping me means helping the Order recapture me, I'll find another way." "There may not be another way." "Then I'll make one." She closed the sketchbook and looked out at the city, where the gaslight was beginning to fade in the growing dawn. "The Order caused the distortion by binding creatures like you, right? Their stolen power is weakening the barriers between worlds." "Essentially, yes. So if we could free the others, all the bound spirits, all the enslaved fae, the distortion might stop on its own." Kale's expression shifted, and for the first time since awakening, he looked genuinely intrigued. "It's theoretically possible, but the Order has dozens of bound servants, each held by different methods, and they won't simply allow us to walk up and break their chains." "No," Alara agreed, "but they need me alive, my power, my potential. It's too valuable to simply destroy. That gives us leverage." "This?" She met his gaze steadily. "I freed you because I believe everyone deserves the right to choose their own path. But if you choose revenge over justice, if you decide that human lives are acceptable casualties, then we're enemies. If you choose to help me find a way to stop the Order without becoming like them," she shrugged, "then maybe we can save both our worlds." Hale was quiet for a long time, staring out at the city that held both their fates. Finally, he spoke. The binding sigil isn't completely broken, he said. Weakened, yes, but not destroyed. If I stray too far from the Order's interests, it will reassert itself. I'll be pulled back into slavery, possibly forever this time. Then we'd better work fast. And if we fail? If the Order recaptures us both? Alara thought of Clara, lying pale and wasting in the charity ward. Of the creatures in the Whispering Market who lived in constant fear of discovery, of all the innocent people who would suffer if the distortion continued unchecked. Then we fail trying to do the right thing instead of succeeding at doing the wrong one. Hale studied her face for a moment, then nodded slowly. Very well, Miss Vance, but understand, if we do this, there's no going back. The Order will never stop hunting us and my people. When they learn what I've done, what I've chosen, they may see me as much a traitor as the humans do. Sometimes the right choice isn't the easy one. No, he agreed, and for the first time since she'd known him, his smile held warmth instead of predatory calculation. It isn't. Outside, the sun crested the horizon, painting Ethelberg's smoke-stained sky in shades of gold and crimson. The gaslight began to fade, but the silver threads connecting to lamps remained visible, pulsing with the stolen power that held the city in the Order's grip. They had work to do.